Happy birthday, Ludwig van Beethoven. So, this is December 17th, and today is the 250th anniversary of not Beethoven's birthday, but Beethoven's baptism day. We don't actually know for sure when Ludwig van Beethoven's birthday was. Most historians are settled on December 16th, but so that's kind of the day we celebrate, and there was a lot of Beethoven talk and commemoration yesterday on the 16th, but I just didn't get around to making a video on time, so now I'm making one today on the 17th. So happy baptism, Beethoven. So it's been kind of interesting seeing the talk around Beethoven's 250th birthday from the side of a music appreciation and records and record collecting, and then also from my peers, fellow classical musicians, because I think there's definitely this sense that, at least in the classical music performing world, that people are kind of sick of Beethoven. And on the one hand, I do kind of sympathize, because I think sometimes orchestras tend to rely on easy sells in their programming, and a Beethoven symphony is an easy public name recognition thing that they feel like they can rely on. So a lot of other music does get passed over for what's to performers may feel like this constant deference and overplaying of Beethoven, especially his symphonies. I'm sympathetic to that viewpoint. However, it still remains that most people have never heard a Beethoven symphony in full. I've never played all of them. I've never even played all of 9. I played part of 9, but I played number 3, number 5, number 6, and number 7. Oh, and number 1. So I've played, about half of them, and I played most of the important ones. But, I've been playing in orchestras for, if you count student stuff, 12 years now. So it depends on what perspective you're coming from. There's also kind of this contrarian movement in classical music today to say Beethoven wasn't a great composer, and it's silly that we're lionizing him as one of the greatest composers that ever lived. Well, how do we measure who is a great composer? How do we measure greatness and reverence in history? Well, one way we can measure it is the fact that we're still talking about him. That's one way to say it. I think there may be some people that are arguing that Beethoven was the greatest on a technical level, which I don't see a lot of evidence for. If we're just talking about pure technique, the proficiency at composing pieces of music in a variety of ways for a variety of occasions at great speed, Mozart was probably a far superior composer on a technical level to Beethoven. But that's not always how we measure greatness. A lot of how we measure how great, how important an artist is, it's about the music, but it's also about the world around them and the impact they had on it. And Beethoven left his imprint on music for the entirety of the 19th century. His shadow looms over the 19th century, over the entire Romantic era. One of the important things that Beethoven helped to do was to push music out of the royal courts and into the public consciousness. He changed fundamentally the relationship between the arts and the public. He was also an Enlightenment figure. A lot of composers dabbled with Enlightenment themes and Enlightenment ideology at the end of the 18th century. Mozart, for instance, wrote the Magic Flute as kind of an ode to Freemasonry and Enlightenment values. However, Beethoven wore those values on his sleeve. He was very open and composed music with an explicit intention of stirring up Republican sentiment and anti-royal sentiment, and the ideas of the Enlightenment, freedom, equality of men, of humankind. He also did a lot to change the structure of music. During Beethoven's lifetime and output, symphonies got longer, a trend that would continue throughout the Romantic era. Before, there wasn't so much emphasis on a symphony as a concert piece that one would go and sit down and view. And under Beethoven, that became a thing. If you go listen to the symphonies of Mozart or Haydn, they are quite short. They were meant to be presented, in salons at parties. They're for small-scale orchestras. A typical Mozart symphony, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Beethoven's symphony is double that length, typically. Beethoven 9 takes up 2 LPs. It wasn't until the CD where we could get Beethoven 9 on one disc. And again, these are things that the Romantic era would become known for. So I think the importance of Beethoven is not so much in the notes he wrote on the page, but the way he had an impact on the musical landscape and the way that impact has stuck with us. Personally, when I listen to Beethoven, I think his music is engaging, thrilling, and emotional in a way that, especially for chamber music, I just don't get with Mozart or Haydn so much. And to be fair, composers like that, their primary output that they put a lot of their energy to was operas. That was kind of what they wanted to be known and remembered for. Beethoven was one of the first composers to really put a large emphasis on chamber music. The idea that chamber music could be presented as a standalone piece of art and not the background for a party. These are all changes that, while Beethoven might not have been the sole innovator in, definitely one of the leading artistic voices to move music in that direction. You notice before I was very careful to say Beethoven van, because Van, V-A-N, was Beethoven's name, not to be confused with Von, V-O-N. Von in German language in the 18th and 19th century was a designation of nobility, of royalty, and Beethoven was not a royal. But what's interesting is, for all his Republican sentiment and his Enlightenment values, he was very careful to always make sure that people could and did mistake his Von for a Von. I always found that very interesting. It's almost like he wanted to be nobility, but he wanted to be nobility on his artistic merits and not by birth. And there's a few Beethoven quotes around with that may or may not be true, with him talking about how he is nobility, but nobility by sheer power of will. And power of will is a big theme in Beethoven, because Beethoven had a lot of strife in his life, both personally and in politics and the environment around him. As most people know, he developed deafness about midway into his career. His deafness is a struggle and a major theme in a lot of his work. And a lot of his music is about the struggle and the will to overcome. Something he's grappling with greatly in the Fifth Symphony. By the time he wrote the Seventh Symphony, his hearing had almost completely gone, and he was completely deaf by the time he wrote the Ninth Symphony, which is possibly what makes it such an achievement, among other things. There's a lot of mythology around Beethoven, and I'm not going to get into that. I shouldn't make this a music history lecture, because I'm not really qualified to give that. I did take a Beethoven class in my undergrad, and I gotta say, if you're interested in reading more about Beethoven, this was the book we used for the class, and I think it's one of the better ones out there. Beethoven by Maynard Solomon. I found this book quite fascinating. It was a really enjoyable class I took at MSM back in the day. It was about 6-7 years ago now. But anyway, this isn't the place for me to give a music history lecture. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of really great ones available for free on the internet that you can watch on Beethoven. There was a really great stream, actually, by Chamber Music of Lincoln Center yesterday that had lectures and presentations celebrating Beethoven's birthday that were recorded at various concerts this and last year before the lockdown. So actually, I'll link it below, because I think it's a really great bout of free programming you can watch on Beethoven and his music. But I'm here to show some records. This is a vinyl channel after all. So I kind of wanted to dig out some of my favorite Beethoven recordings, some that I kind of turn to that are easy to recommend, that I enjoy listening to. And I'm going to start with his symphonies. One of my favorite conductors that we have a recorded legacy of is Bruno Walter. Bruno Walter was one of kind of the last of his breed of conductors. He was actually friends with Mahler and a lot of great romantic composers of the early 20th century, and so he's one of our greatest links to the past, I think, and it's wonderful that we have a high fidelity recorded legacy of his final years. One of the best recordings, I think, in his catalog of kind of stereo works is this recording he did at Columbia of Beethoven's Third Symphony, the Eroica Symphony, with the Columbia Symphony Orchestra. This is the Classic Records pressing. I don't think any other audiophile labels have reissued this at this time. This one is pretty easy to hunt down. You shouldn't have too much trouble. And of course, you could always get the original Columbia, although I think the Classic is probably a safer bet. Any classical video I make, it's pretty much a given that I'm going to show a Chicago Reiner recording. And here we have a living stereo Chicago Fritz Reiner recording of the Fifth Symphony. This was issued as a shaded dog pressing. I don't have a shaded dog. Mine is a later white dog pressing. I do really need to get myself a shaded dog copy one of these days. I think if there's any Beethoven symphony that Chicago is a go-to for, it's the Fifth Symphony, because it's kind of the most in-your-face bombastic of Beethoven symphonies. I just watched Paul Baraka P. Dub's video on Beethoven that came out last night, and he showed this record, and even if he didn't do that, I was going to show it anyway because it's such a great recording. Here we have Bruno Walter again and the Columbia Symphony once more doing Beethoven 6. This one is on Analog Productions. It's, I think, the only classical Columbia Analog Productions has ever done. Absolutely outstanding sound. I have no idea how Columbia got such good sound, because so many of their other classical recordings are kind of in terms of audio quality. This one is wonderful, and the interpretation is probably definitive. There's not many other Beethoven Pastoral Symphony recordings that I think I would turn to as safely. Maybe the Pierre Monteux recording, maybe. The elephant in the room that I don't have with me here that is worth mentioning is are the Carlos Kleiber recordings with Vienna on Deutsche Grammophon. The recorded output we have from Carlos Kleiber is small, but it's all pretty much definitive. His recordings of Symphony No. 5 and Symphony No. 7 are pretty incredible. If you never heard them, go to Tidal or like HD Tracks, or even rummage through the Deutsche Grammophon section at a classical record store and get it. You can pick it up really cheaply. Those, performance-wise, are some of the best recordings of 5 and 7 out there. It's just sitting at my apartment right now. I don't have it here. I do have another really good recording of 7, also with the Vienna Philharmonic. This time with Herbert von Karajan. This is a living stereo, RCA living stereo pressing of Karajan conducting Symphony No. 7 with the Vienna Phil. And this is an original shaded dog. It sounds wonderful, very holographic. I am not a big fan of Karajan's later output, especially on Deutsche Grammophon, but I think some of the stuff he did in the 50s and 60s with RCA, with Deca, with EMI even, is quite good. There's a lot of talent there. I just think towards his later career, he let some of his celebrity go to his head, I think, and because of that, some of his later output is a little muffled and sloppy, in my opinion. And finally, we get to the ninth, where I just listened to this yesterday and it was brilliant. We have the Schulte Chicago recording of the Ninth Symphony on Deca. This is a Speaker's Corner reissue. Absolutely lovely, but if you don't want to hunt for the Speaker's Corner reissue, you can get an original UK pressed London of this. Very affordable, maybe like 10 bucks. So now we move to concertos. And I picked 2 concertos to pull out, Piano Concerto No. 3 And this is one of my all-time favorite Deca recordings I have. This is Beethoven's third piano concerto on London Deca with Wilhelm Bakus, the Vienna Phil, conducted by, I hate pronouncing this guy's name, Hans Schmidt Isserstedt. I think I said that right. Bakus's later years, his elderly recordings at the advent of the stereo era on Deca are really marvelous because he's really kind of one of those old school pianists. I think this is a edition 2 pressing. Oh no, this is an edition 1. Yeah, this is an edition 1. Really lovely grooved pressing London Deca. It sounds phenomenal. And of course, Blueback. This is another early Deca stereo. However, this is a Speaker's Corner reissue of another. This is actually SXL 2002, so I think it was the second one in the catalog of stereo Decas. The Emperor Concerto. This time this is played by Clifford Curzon. Again with the Vienna Phil. This time conducted by Hans Knappersbusch. You have to include the Beethoven Violin Concerto in any roundup of Beethoven works. Well, I've never played this work as a violin concerto. I have played it as a piano concerto. Yeah, the violin concerto in D major is often played as a piano concerto. It's so virtuosic, I guess, that they needed more hands. But this is a wonderful recording of the violin concerto version on Columbia, with Isaac Stern playing violin, Leonard Bernstein conducting the New York Philharmonic. And this is a very nice early Columbia 6-eye pressing that sounds quite nice. You know, on these Columbias were never amazing sounding, especially compared to the Decas and the RCAs for classical. But the early, like I say in other videos, the early 6-eye pressings are probably the best you're going to get. They have kind of a more holographic sound, more of a tubey sound. Beethoven, despite his rather long life, only completed one opera, his opera Fidelio. This is his kind of Enlightenment rallying cry, the piece basically dedicated to the idea of liberty and freedom. It's not a perfect opera. It's Beethoven was not one who was incredibly proficient at composing for the voice, although he did do a beautiful job. But yeah, I really enjoyed this Vienna Bernstein recording. I haven't heard an amazing amount of Fidelio recordings, but I really like this one. There's also a really great one, if anyone has like Met Opera on demand, there's a really great one from about, I want to say 15 years ago with René Pape singing one of the roles. That one is great if you just want to stream something. I'm going to speed it up because I can see my camera battery dying. This is one I come back to quite often. The Beethoven violin sonatas, the Kreutzer and the Spring Sonata are two of the most well-known. And I am a big fan of David Ostrich's violin playing, the Russian violin virtuoso. And here is a lovely Speaker's Corner reissue of the Phillips recording of Ostrich playing the Kreutzer Sonata along with the Spring Sonata. If I have to reach for a Beethoven chamber music recording, this is usually the one I go for. I wanted to grab something a little more recent. This is a record that I think kind of got passed by a lot of people. Now I don't hear anyone talking about it, and it seems to have not sold well, but I really enjoyed it. This is a Hyperion Night recording of the Waldstein Sonata by Beethoven. And this was actually mastered by Kevin Gray and put out by Analog Productions. And the sound is incredible. The performance, I think, I mean, I'm not a pianist, but the performance sounds wonderful to me. Very engaging, very, romantic in its interpretation. And you also get a bonus of the piano version of Stravinsky's Petrushka on it. So, and last but not least, this is actually a recent addition to my collection, and I'm really excited about it. I talk about direct-to-disc recordings a lot on my channel, and a couple of years ago, I had seen Michael Fremer talking about this cool Nimbus direct-to-disc box set he had of the Beethoven piano sonatas, and he only had volume 1. And so he talked about how great it sounded, but it was kind of like a rare pickup. He got it, I think, at Princeton Record Exchange. And I think at that time, I tried to track down, either volume 1 or volume 2 or 3. I think there's 4 volumes in total. And I just couldn't find them. They're not crazy expensive, but they just seem to never come up for sale. I think they were pressed in very low numbers. But I finally did find one not too long ago. This is volume 3 of Bernard Roberts playing the Beethoven piano sonatas. And the ones that are on this box set that are worthwhile, the named Beethoven piano sonatas, are the Waldstein and the Appassionata. I love the Appassionata sonata, but this actually has sonatas number 16 through number 25. So a lot of Beethoven solo piano music in this box. Very well played by Bernard Roberts, and with stunning direct to disc, direct to lathe sound. So I hope you enjoyed my Beethoven roundup. I hope I introduced some recordings to you that you maybe hadn't heard of. I don't know if there's the right way to celebrate Beethoven's birthday. I hope that you'll celebrate Beethoven's birthday as you wish. It's just a reminder of the impact this one person had on the course of art in the last 2.5 centuries. It's quite astonishing. And if that's not really your cup of tea, well, that's fine too. Not everyone has to like all the same stuff. I know people that, they don't like any romantic music, but they're classical musicians and they like, contemporary stuff. That's cool too. Celebrate the music that you want to celebrate and talk about the music that you want to talk about. I just really like the music of Beethoven. I think his life was fascinating, and I have a lot of respect for the impact he left on my field, on classical music. It's remarkable, in my opinion. So I hope you'll join me in wishing him a happy birthday by listening to some of his music. So until next time, VC, cheers.